OC World is made possible by the generous contributions of the Marisla Foundation, the Keith and Judy Swain Family Foundation, Orange County Community Foundation, the Cordoba Corporation, and viewers like you. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to OC World. I'm your host, Joone Kim-Lopez. The pen is mightier than the sword, and no one knows that better than our guest today, Gustavo Arellano. He's a columnist for LA Times, known for his satirical approaches to hard issues such as race relations, and for his influence on the fate of well-known political figures. His journalistic roots started in Orange County, where he grew up, and he continues to pay homage through his writing, most recently and notably, A People's Guide to Orange County. Welcome to the show, Gustavo.
Gracias for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Now, as the son of two illegal immigrants, and one of them who came in the trunk of a Chevy, what did they think when you said you're going to be a journalist?
They were just happy that I was going to finally make use of all the books that I always wanted. So being as a reporter. And my mom, she actually came here to the country legally because my grandmother was an American citizen, but my dad was the one who came into this country in the trunk of a Chevy. So they didn't really have any expectations for what I would be as a career. They knew I was different from, I'm the oldest of four. I was the nerd in the family. So they knew it was gonna be something involving books or talking. And so they've been proud of me though, ever since.
So you are a self-proclaimed nerd. What does that mean for you? How did you grow up that way?
Look at me. This is a nerd. It's not self-proclamation. Everyone sees that. But no, I mean, that meant reading a lot. That meant being picked on by other people. That means being called a nerd. As I tell people, I'm so glad now that it seems nerds, and especially kids with glasses, are accepted in society, because I grew up in an era where they weren't. It was literally the mark for a beatdown. And I never got beat up though, because I always had a sharp enough tongue to be able to get out of any situations. And also I knew how to, I don't know, I think bigger kids had pity on me, so they decided to be my defenders instead of my beater-uppers, for lack of a better term. But yeah, and just caring about reading more than anything. I think that's what characterized me as a nerd, and still does to this day.
So you use words as a means of survival, getting through a very tough situation growing up. I mean, we laugh about it now, but being bullied and being a nerd is not easy. Yeah. And when did you first realize the power of your words, both written and verbal?
I mean, being able to get out of situations, that helped me out a lot. But in terms of power as a writer, and because I never thought I would be a writer, even though I loved books, I never had any aspirations to be a reporter, an author, or whatever. I actually want to be a film director.
I did?
Oh yeah, in Anaheim High. I remember when I saw Pulp Fiction on a bootleg tape, and it just changed my life. Me and my best friend Art, we saw it at least 50 times until the tape actually broke. We're like, we're gonna be telling stories, but we're gonna tell stories of the Mexican-American community. That went nowhere because I did go to school to it, UCLA, Orange Coast College, Chapman, but I ended up by accident getting into journalism. And I think when I realized that the pen is mightier than the sword was when I started doing articles, and people would get either upset by them, like a lot, calling me a sellout, or saying, wow, you're covering our communities that have never been covered before. And that's when I thought, as a reporter, I could do a story, it could come out in a week and get read by 500,000 people. If I wanted to do a film, it would take me 2 years if I'm lucky. And then I don't know who's gonna see it, if anyone.
When people say you're a sellout,
yeah,
what does that mean for them?
They think that I should be defending a particular community, and if I say anything bad about that community, that somehow I'm turning my back on it. And usually it involves the Latino community or Mexican-American community. And it's a charged term, and it's a term that can ruin many careers and ruin many lives. But for me, it's like, look, I'm very proud of being Mexican-American. My parents are both Mexican immigrants from the state of Zacatecas. Mexicans have always been demeaned in the United States in general, in Southern California in particular, and Orange County specifically. So I will celebrate Mexican Americans as much as I can, but if we do something wrong, if an individual does something wrong, or if there's a communal pathology that we have, I'm gonna call it out. And if you wanna call me a sellout, well, have fun.
So on the flip side of that, do you think you are harder on the Mexicans and Latinos?
No, I'm hard on idiots. I'm hard on corrupt people. I'm hard on people who, I'm hard on bullies. That's what I'm hard at. And they come in all shades and all ethnic classes, all, poor, rich, whatever, they're there. I do not pick on any one particular group or any one particular individual. I will get on you if you're someone who needs to be got on, so to speak.
So you're sort of a reporter with an attitude. Would you say that's correct?
No, not really. I mean, I have a chip on my shoulder, of course. If you're a nerd growing up, if you're a Mexican-American kid in Orange County growing up, you are going to have a chip on your shoulder. But with an attitude, I mean, people have said I have an attitude, but it's like, I don't know. I think I'm a nice guy. I'm a nerd.
So is that chip still on your shoulder?
It'll always be on my shoulder. It should be on my shoulder, but it should never blind me. I should not, and I've also never been obsessed with it. This is not the only thing that defines me. Other things define me. What they are, I don't know. But it's like, I am always seeking to cover great stories. And more than anything, I'm trying to seek what are the facts. What is it that are, who were we, who are we, and who are we becoming as Californians? Especially since joining the LA Times, that's been my main obsession, trying to answer that question. And the great thing is that there is no one answer, but I'm gonna go seek all of them.
Now, with so much in the media, there's social media, there's the journalism of LA Times. With so much information and misinformation that's out there, are you ever afraid you're wrong?
Oh, I'm sure I'm wrong all the time. It's not a matter of me worrying if I'm wrong, but me interrogating myself all the time to see. I do not like to assume anything. I'm always going to be questioning myself. I'm always going to be questioning others. In fact, if I discover that I have something wrong, if I did something wrong, then I'm going to do something about it. For instance, I did a column where I said that the LAPD budget for Los Angeles for last year was $11.8 billion. That was for the entire city. So that was kind of a dumb mistake on my end, but I was able to do a column about why is it that certain figures when it comes to the LAPD budget get more attention than other figures. And I was able to interview Chief Michael Moore about it. And it was funny because I was giving him these numbers and he's saying, where are you getting that? Where are you getting that? And finally we realized we were reading from two completely different documents. He was reading from a 26-page summary of the Los Angeles budget. I was reading from the actual 500 and some page budget, like the entire damn thing. So it's like, all right, so Chief Moore, you have your idea of what reality is, and I have the actual facts here right in front of me. I never look for the summary of anything, in other words. I go to the actual root source, and I'm always looking for it.
And law enforcement is something that you've covered multiple times, from LAPD to former Sheriff Villanueva, what's going on in the city of Santa Ana. Do you have something that you're trying to prove with law enforcement and how it affects our communities? Because you seem to cover that area a lot.
Law enforcement's always going to be important in communities. I mean, it has always been a force, for better or for worse, in our communities. And sadly, I think we've gotten to a point where law enforcement thinks that they are no longer part of those communities. I have family who's in law enforcement. Or was in law enforcement. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not going to just have a knee-jerk hatred of them, but I do think that the system needs to be reformed one way or another. I think just asking questions about where money is allocated when it comes to budgets, those are perfectly legitimate answers. And I also think that law enforcement, when they do mistakes, they need to not only be accountable to themselves, but be accountable to the community. And my issue, especially when it comes to law enforcement leaders and also the rank and file, is that they will close ranks around them. It's that whole idea of the thin blue line. And I have a huge issue with that. You are public servants. You are not above us. We pay for your salaries, so we should be able to interrogate you as much as possible. If you do good, then we should celebrate that. But the minute you do bad, especially you folks, yeah, there are more expectations on you to do good because you are supposedly the defenders, the deciding, not the deciding line, but sort of the defenders between what is good and what is bad.
Well, there's a lot of power and authority in wearing that uniform. And you mentioned earlier you self-interrogate, you challenge yourself. So how do you check your own bias?
Oh, I always say that everyone has biases, but you should never let your bias get in the way of a good story. So I will do stories many times about things I do not agree with at all, but I find it to be a fascinating story. I did a story once about a gentleman who owns an apple farm up in, Oakland, the classic apple growing, picking region of Southern California. And this is a guy who was suing school districts because they were accusing him of just being very nasty on social media from a conservative bent. And I went to him and I said, look, I think what you said on social media, it's beyond the pale. I find it fascinating, though, that you're claiming a First Amendment right for you to be not having your contracts canceled. Let's talk. And he didn't trust me. I'm the LA Times, I'm liberal, blah, blah, blah. But at the end, I just reported on the facts. And he said, this was a fair article. Thank you for hearing me out. And some people did not like the fact that I gave the man his chance to speak. For me, it's like, I'm going to challenge that. I thought it was an interesting story. He ended up losing his lawsuit, but whatever. I was there to be able to report on it. So you always have to, you cannot you cannot create a narrative and not want to challenge it. You should always be challenging it, because if it's wrong, sometimes you could go in such much better directions than just believing whatever the hype was for something.
So not everyone, I'm sure, has been happy with your reporting.
Story of my life.
Yeah. Have you ever been really confronted, I mean, in a very threatening way?
Lawsuits, death threats, threats of lawsuits more than anything. Yeah, more so for the OC Weekly, because that was a whole other era of journalism. For the Los Angeles Times, knock on wood, I haven't been threatened with any defamation cases just yet. But people, there's always going to be people who do not like what you do for whatever reason. I'll listen to them if they have something legit to say. And by legit, I'm talking about writing to me or reaching out to me in a respectful manner. But if you're going to come and say blah, 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 yeah, I'm probably going to blah, blah, blah right back at you. I like doing that. I mean, people hate Twitter. I like Twitter. Twitter's fun. Yeah, but I also know what it is. It's a cesspool. So when you're in the cesspool, you got to throw things around.
How do you keep your words from having power and influence? Because pushed to its limit, words can be a weapon. Mm-hmm. How do you find that balance?
It's not so much about limiting the power of my words, but knowing what you're saying and choosing what you want to write about. I mean, I'm always looking for stories that tell us, again, who we were, who we are, and who are we becoming as Californians. Do I have opinions on things? Oh yeah, I have a lot of opinions on things, but I really try to make my column where it's not about my opinions. Sometimes I'll weigh in a little bit depending on whatever it is, but actually that's actually one of the notes that I get from my editors, like, just talk a little bit more about what you think about it. For me, like, anyone, you could go to anyone for an opinion. You only go to some people for the great stories. So that's what I want to be. If people know what I say, that's cool. If people identify me with a certain type of story, that's awesome. But I'd rather people remember the story that I told, and to the point where they're like, did you read that story? They don't have to mention my name at all. I'm not such an egomaniac that I want people to think about me and me alone. Think about the stories. And
you've written a lot of stories. Your roots are from Orange County. You mentioned OC Weekly. And when you look at Orange County, and particularly if you want to talk about the Latino population, you talked about where people were, where they are, where they're going. When you look at the community of Orange County, what's the biggest change that you're seeing between the past, present, and what are you most concerned about for the future? Oh, it's far more democratic now. I mean, I always tell people this is not John Wayne's Orange County anymore. It's not even my Orange County. The Democratic Party, and by the way, full disclosure, I'm a Democrat, but only because I lost a bet. It has... We got to come back to that. What do you mean you lost a bet? Yeah, in 2018, I went to the Laguna Woods Democratic Club, and I told them what I forecast the election to be in 2018. And I told them, I think you folks will, you'll win some seats. I don't think you'll win a majority of the seats for Congress. But if the Democratic Party wins a majority of the congressional seats in Orange County, I'll register as a Democrat. I was always declined to state. Lo and behold, there was a sweep. So when it was January, I came back and I signed up, and I always say I'm a Laguna Woods Democrat, and I'm very proud of that. Okay, well, going back about how Orange County has changed in the lens of the Latino population, what's the biggest change that you've seen, and what worries you about the future? Yeah, again, it's just more democratic, so you're getting more equity, you're getting more voices in terms, some of the issues that are now at the forefront of Orange County: housing affordability, police reform. These are things that would have never been thought about even a decade ago. Now it's happening. In terms of the future, it's housing. It's getting good jobs here, getting and more importantly, getting an Orange County where everyone cares about each other. Not just like, how do you make someone from San Clemente care about what's happening in La Habra? That to me is always the existential question of Orange County. You have a unique path as a journalist, as a reporter. When you look at the media landscape right now, particularly in Orange County, what are you seeing or not seeing? Nothing. There's nothing left in Orange County when it comes to media. Look, the Voice of OC is great. I think only wonks read them, people who actually care about politics. You have to get everyone reading you. The Orange County Register is a shell of what it was. In fact, I always see on their bios, they don't like the bios for the reporters at the Orange County Register, they don't even say they're the Register anymore. They say they're Southern California News Group. That is such a shame.
And yeah, there's a lot of Facebook forums, but they're not run by reporters. They all have agendas. Everyone has, those are the two entities left that don't have agendas. You need another publication. I mean, I used to be the head of the Alt Weekly that was here, OC Weekly, and we were great because our only agenda was that we hated Orange County so much that we loved it, and we were going to celebrate and excoriate all of it. And there's no one left to do that anymore. Yeah, you have stuff on Instagram, on TikTok or whatever, but nothing to the depth that we were able to bring. And Orange County is for the worse, absolutely for the worse.
And to give that kind of voice that you say is lacking right now in Orange County, this very show, OC World,
I love it,
is a product of that. How do we tell the story that connects, that relate, that can hopefully make an impact? And so what is your thought about this model? It's a nonprofit. We tell people's story. We connect with people. I mean, not just because you're sitting here, but what do you think of different models of journalism and shows like this?
You should always go for models that work. And if it works, then that's awesome. Nonprofit journalism, Voice of OC's nonprofit. I love it. It's great. Also, though, because you're a nonprofit, you can't be ruthless. I do believe you can't mock things. I've never seen one of these nonprofit news agencies that mock. And that's what OC Weekly did so brilliantly, mocked. You have to be able to mock. I feel people always talk about, oh, we're in cancel culture now. Well, no, it's not that. What concerns me more is that we are now in such, how can I put this? People take themselves too seriously nowadays. And people cannot laugh at themselves. That is not, to me, that's not cancel or woke or anything. It's just like we're so high and mighty, so like sanctimonious that the jesters, the mockers, they are seen as somehow out of bounds, and you can't do that stuff anymore. I see some of the stuff that we used to do at OC Weekly. Oh, so many people would be infuriated if they read it today, and they should. And you need an organization that does that type of journalism.
But fueling emotion, doesn't that get in the way of facts and rationality? Because right now, our society seems so emotionally just ignited and polarized. So how do you do that without losing sight of fact, which is you're a fact warrior?
Yeah, well, you can't mock people without the facts, because then that becomes libel, that becomes slander, that becomes defamation. And as someone who got, not personally, but at the OC Weekly, we got sued multiple times for defamation, and we won every single one of those cases. We know that if you're gonna mock something, it better stick. In other words, you don't just throw a jab to throw a jab. You better make sure that the jab lands, and you better make sure that the jab hits. And you should always be punching up, never down, but also be open to sometimes if you have to, knock around someone within your own family for doing something dumb, then you do that,
Do you think that had you taken a different approach, that you would be further along in your career? It's a valid point.
No way. Not even. My career, my path is the only one I ever wanted. And look, I love being at the Los Angeles Times, but they would never have had me if it wasn't for what I was able to prove at OC Weekly, because I didn't go to school for journalism. I had no aspirations to be a reporter until I found OC Weekly, which was my type of magazine, a street fighting magazine. The Los Angeles Times were not a street fighting newspaper, and that's no knock to us. We have a different level of journalism. And so if it wasn't for how I was able to prove myself at the OC Weekly, I would not have the opportunities. I probably wouldn't even be in journalism. It was a perfect entry point for me to get in. Now at the Los Angeles Times, of course, I still think I do the same type of journalism. And people say, like, no, it used to be better back in the day when you used to be able to cuss. I'm like, no, look. Right now we're talking, I'm not cussing because I'm not allowed to cuss because of FCC. If I get on another podcast, I will cuss up a storm. You should always have your same message, but there's gonna be different audiences for that messages. I talk to kindergartners, I talk to senior citizens. I talk at, community colleges, I've talked at Ivy League schools. It's always the same message, but it's just a different way of sending it,
And you teach, and with teaching, with writing comes responsibility. And when you give advice to the next generation of journalists, what do you share about your lessons learned? That's your biggest advice.
Never let your biases get in the way of a good story. Always go for the facts. Don't pay attention to the haters. Who cares if they hate you or like you as long as they read you? And more than anything, I tell people, anything that you publish, you should be able to stand by for the rest of your days. That should be the approach. When you do a story, are you proud of that story? There's going to be some stories that you're more prouder of. Yes, there's going to be some stories, that maybe you didn't want to do, but an editor told you to do. But you should, at the end, be able to be proud of what you did. And you should be able to look back on your career and say, I did good. I did good.
Any stories you'd like to take back if you could?
No, I will stand by all of them. That's not to say there's some stories I see, I'm like, wow, I'm not going to say them right here, but there's some interesting ones. But I'm going to answer for them. And I'm going to say why I did what I did. And if people want to judge me on that, then all right, that's cool.
What is a story or a topic that you haven't done yet that you'd love to do?
I've covered it all. I mean, be a foreign correspondent, I guess. But I've never wanted to be a foreign correspondent just because the reason I even got into journalism was because there were so few stories being told about Orange County that I wanted to cover Orange County. And I always covered, even when I covered Southern California, I try to cover it as a foreign correspondent. It's like, all right, here's a story. Like, I just did a story, there's going to be a special election to replace the disgraced ex-council member in Los Angeles, Nuri Martinez. So as not being someone from that district, this is in the eastern San Fernando Valley, I thought to myself, what could be a good way to be able to make people who are not from that district bring it to life? And so what I did, I traveled all around, Arleta, Sun Valley, Panorama City, Van Nuys, just driving around and try to bring it to life. And I got a lot of good response, especially from people in CD6 saying like, wow, you really showed who we are in just 1,200 words and just one day of driving around, like you did that. So why be a foreign correspondent when there's just so much here in a galaxy called Southern California?
And that was a great story because you talk about this one mural with the bear.
Bears, yeah.
And you talk about the mama bear and sort of the potential downfall and pitfalls of that. And if there is one thing that you would do if you weren't a journalist, what would that be?
Archivist. I loved, or librarian, and not a public librarian, nothing against public librarians, but like a specific field. I actually said this on Twitter the other day. In an alternate universe, I would have been a film librarian for Warner Brothers because I studied film. I remember we took a tour of the Warner Brothers lot, and I loved it because Warner Brothers just has always made amazing films and films of all types. And I'm like, oh, I should try to apply for them, like do an internship, and that just never worked out. But I could have been very happy doing that, like not talking to anyone, but just helping people. All
right, in 10 seconds or less. I know you like to sing. Anyway, we can get a couple bars from you. Caminos de Michoacán. Na, 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 na. I always make up lyrics, so that's all you get. I love it. Thank you so much.
Gracias.
And thank you to our viewers for joining us today on OC World. Words have power. We say it with caution, care, and intention. Whether it's in writing or verbal, it has an impact to people, those who we know and those who might even be strangers. And it comes with power and influence is a great deal of responsibility. And at OC World, we take very kind care to make sure the stories that we tell have the impact that is lasting and hopefully helpful. So again, until next time, stay safe and be well.
I like the word designated, as in designated driver, the person who lays off the booze so everyone else can have a good time and get home safely. And I like the designated hitter in baseball. Most pitchers not named Shohei Ohtani are terrible hitters. So instead of making the pitcher hit, a real hitter bats instead. Safer roads, better baseball. Designated works. So now I'm appealing to a special group of my journalistic brethren, the White House Press Corps. Dear colleagues, it's time for the designated shouter. What am I talking about? Listen to this.
Folks, wait. Hold on. You know we are going to do a press conference. So we'll answer your questions at the press conference, and that's going to be shortly. And I don't know how shortly, but shortly. Okay?
Can we ask one quick question?
Thank you. Let's go. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's go. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Or how about this?
Oh, come on. One question. Are you worried about the balloon? Are you? A little bit?
Stop supporting me. We're going to avoid a recession.
I could show you many more. Now, I know what these reporters are thinking. The president is in a bind. He doesn't want to talk about it, and he's running away from us. But here's what I think most viewers are thinking. The president is in a bind. He doesn't want to talk about it. And what a bunch of cackling idiots those people are. I think President Biden senses that too, because as you've seen, often he's smiling over it. And sometimes he even shoots back.
President Biden ignoring questions from reporters once again and even dissing them out loud as they were shuffled out of the room by his staffers.
Mr. President, you've talked. Thank you very much. We need you guys to move. Thank you very much. Please. Thank you.
Among the only press in the world that does this. Seriously.
Look, I've been in the media pack. I know that reporters have important questions, and often it's the most assertive journalists who get their questions answered. And I know that sometimes a shouted question catches the president's attention, stops him in his tracks, and results in a response that imparts useful information. But when everybody's yelling at once, all you get is a noisy circus. It disrespects the presidency and diminishes the media. So, White House press corps, please, come up with a designated shouter. At the end of each press conference, or during a photo op with a foreign dignitary, or when the president is shuffling to and fro, decide in advance who among you will be designated to shout the tough, incisive, probing questions. Maybe he'll answer. Maybe he won't. If he doesn't, well, he'll look like he's in a bind. He doesn't want to talk about it, and he's running away. Too bad for the president. But at least the media will salvage a little bit of its dignity and maybe win back a little of its credibility, too.